first of all, you see, what's been happening here at Rigpa is that there's been some regular meditation courses that's been going on. And also there's been courses on, for example, on Lojong or compassion. Is that? Yes. So in some ways it's kind of appropriate now we are starting on, for example, on Tantra. Even though I do introduce the Tantric practices in the retreats. Retreats are kind of world, how do you say? A kind of a world on their own. How would you say? What's the expression? But then generally here in Rigpa itself, I haven't introduced, or we haven't introduced, the Tantra, though it comes in different teachings, but Tantra as such, this is the first time I'm doing at least this year. But so in doing, you see, first I think it's important to understand that the word Tantra is actually not used in Tibetan Buddhism, or rather it's not the name or not the term that is used to describe Tantric Buddhism. It's generally called Mantrayana or Vajrayana, or if you want to use the full term, secret mantra Vajrayana. Sang means secret, Ha is mantra, Doje Thekpa is Vajrayana. In that, Tantra is actually, the word Tantra is actually related to the texts of Tantra, is known as Tantra Gyu. Do you understand? The texts, Tantric texts are known as Tantra. So that the teaching as a whole, the vehicle of the Tantra, is not so much known as Tantrayana. That's something that's more kind of popularly addressed in that way in the West. But whereas in Tibetan it's called Mantrayana, or secret mantra Vajrayana, or Vajrayana. That's why you might hear the word Vajrayana, or you might hear the word Mantrayana. It's the same thing. And in fact the Tantra is used to describe actually the teachings. The texts are known as Tantra. So, but what is this word Tantra, which in Tibetan is Gyu? What does it mean? Actually, Gyu is a, how do you say, is a thread or continuity. It actually speaks of, you see, kind of the energy. Is relating to the energy, kind of getting the beginning of the thread, so to speak, and kind of connecting with the energy. Because whereas in, for example, in Hinayana or Mahayana, in Hinayana the emphasis on more on meditation, realizing of egolessness. In the Mahayana, it's more developing compassion and realizing of the nature of shunyata or emptiness. Whereas in Tantra is very much to do with, for example, working with energy and working with perception. That's why we call this one the vision of the Tantra, or you can say the Tantric outlook, or which in Tibetan is known as Tang Na. Tak means pure, Nang is perception, the pure perception of Tantra. Or sometimes Master like Chogyam Trungpa translates this Dana as sacred outlook. Can you hear me? Because I've got a bit of a cold, so my voice is a bit abnormal. So I think it might be a good idea to use, for example, this teaching I gave in Paris, which was quite good, to use not the whole thing, but some of the points from that which has been kind of marked out. And if Philip could just, how do you say, just bring out the points, and then I'll address on. Okay, just going through points. Maybe you need a microphone, perhaps. I think there are certain things in
The whole principle of tantric practice is pure vision, or dagna in Tibetan.
Dagna. Dag means pure. Nang is perception of vision.
Some masters translate this as sacred outlook. The sacred vision you see in the sacredness of everything, the holiness in everything.
You see, when you enter into that dimension of sacredness, into that dimension of pure perception, into that vision of Tantra, then you enter into the dimension of the mandala. But before you do that, there are certain, how would you say, preliminaries or certain practices that are actually beneficial. Anyway, please continue.
Normally in life we do two things. Either we defend or we attack. Or thirdly, we are indifferent, passive. So there are three things that you do. Something good, something bad, or something that's neither, in between, in Tibetan called lungmaten. But actually when you do the practice of meditation, you are free of those three states.
So I'm introducing meditation from a tantric perspective. I'd like to enter into that dimension.
The main thing is actually focus, presence and awareness. That is non-ego. Just you are.
You are as simply as you are.
That very open, spacious presence with clear awareness. Awareness is not being clever. There are sometimes intelligent people who use their intelligence to find fault in others or their cleverness. That is not the intelligence we are talking about here.
For example, it is said in the Dzogchen teachings, there are 4 principles or 4 guidelines. The 4 guidelines are, for example, when you receive teachings, you actually follow the message of the teacher, message and follow the teaching of the teacher rather than hang on to his personality, depend on his personality, number 1. Secondly, you actually, go for the meaning. I mean, if you would speak in English way, you go for the meaning. Cockney way, you go for the, how'd you say it? You go for the meaning rather than the words. Clear? That is not get down on words, but actually try to get what the real meaning behind the words are. Then thirdly, even in meaning, to get the actual, the real, the definitive meaning, rather than your opinions about it, your interpretations about it. Clear? And then lastly, you depend on your wisdom mind, that is your pure awareness, rather than your judgmental mind. So normally when someone is clever, is intelligent or uses intelligence or logic in a kind of a twisted way, finding a lot of faults, it's the more judgmental mind. You understand? This is not what we mean by the realm of awareness here. In the meditative state of the wisdom awareness is when one is in the state of wisdom, when one sees everything, but where there is no clinging, where there is no judgment, where there's the attachment doesn't enter into perception, where the perception left purely as perception. Is it clear?
Buddha spoke on many different levels to suit different kinds of people. These levels became known as vehicles or yanas.
See, it's very interesting about Buddha is that, he did not teach one religion. He taught different vehicles, different means to liberate different beings, because we are all very different. He also realized that even for one person, like especially the modern man, is very kind of sophisticated or intricate or complicated or neurotic. in a kind of a sophisticated way. As a result, we require different methods at different times to suit our different moods and temperaments. So in a sense that these different ways, you understand? It's like, if you keep on eating one same old dish, you get bored with it, You have different dishes kind of thing. You understand? That's one of the examples of Dalai Lama, not mine. And so in that he taught many different ways to bringing about the vehicles, yanas. It's interesting, the word yana, because yana is vehicle, is something, you see, path or stage is something static. Yana, or the vehicle, is always moving. The vehicle is a kind of a vehicle for evolution, for development. So not necessarily one is always at one level, or rather, in a sense, in the ultimate sense, that there are no such thing as levels as such. There are only vehicles. Do you understand? So in a sense that there are means to opening, means to, bringing about that evolution.
There are principally three kinds of yana, known as Hinayana, Mahayana and Vajrayana. So firstly with Hinayana. Hina means lower, so lower yana or lesser vehicle. That does not imply that it is lower. It's more in the sense of being simpler. Simple in terms of the teachings.
It's very simple, it's very, uncomplicated. It's kind of, it's where you begin first. Generally speaking, there are also, yanas are according to your temperament. There are beings who are basic dispositions such that they are naturally have an opening for Mahayana teachings or for Vajrayana. As such, they are already receptive to those teachings. Whereas otherwise, normally one would begin with the Hinayana practice as such. You understand? So we're kind of building up now, because when you talk about Tantra, it's very important to actually go through all.
So there are two levels. One on a physical level in terms of worldly experience, and then a psychological level of realization.
Meaning in the Hinayana there are two levels. One is called Sravakayana, where you see, Sravaka means nyentu. You listen. Nye is listen. Tu is hear. Meaning you listen to the teaching of the Buddha and hear actually the truth in life. Hear the self-evident truth. And this actually refers to the Buddha's teaching on the, for example, Four Noble Truths, which are the first principle of the Buddha's teaching, Four Noble Truths, which, remember, as many of you know, that the Buddha first taught in Saranath, in Varanasi, in the deer park. That's where he taught the Four Noble Truths. And it's, that's called the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma.
On an actual level, you begin to examine...
Okay, that's the first one. So the first, talking about the... is it about the...
Four Noble Truths.
Okay.
On an actual level, you begin to examine the world, and you find that there is suffering, frustration,
Okay, I think
pain.
I'll speak this and see if there are any points that you'd like to add to that, the good one. You see, generally, I think it's important for you to... How many here are completely new to Buddhism? Have no clue whatsoever? Oh, that's good, at least, quite a few. Okay. The rest are quite familiar, a little bit familiar. Are you? A little bit familiar. Alright, so we don't have to kind of go too basic then. We don't have to explain who Buddha is. I think maybe still no harm actually. Is, I think, the principle of Buddha. And what is important in Buddhism is to realize the principle. principles. The principal Buddha, which is actually intermittently connected together with the principle of refuge, is the principal Buddha is that